You're listening to Permission To, the podcast where we dive into the science and soul of owning your worthiness as a perfectly imperfect human being. I'm your host, Sam Dew, psychotherapist, positive psychology coach, mama to a beautiful 5-year-old Amelie, and passionate advocate for living an inspired life. My aim is to show you that you have full permission to own your worthiness so that you can embrace your true nature and begin walking boldly toward your dreams. Let's dive in. Bethan Winn is one of Australia's leading critical thinking and human skills facilitators, a multi-faceted educator with over 2 decades of experience. She delivers training on critical thinking, decision-making, and problem-solving. She is passionate about sharing critical thinking skills in accessible, engaging ways to demonstrate their value in professional, personal, and academic contexts. So welcome, Bethan. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited, Sam.
I'm excited too. I feel like we were kind of having a little pre-chat, and I feel like that could have gone on for an hour. I was like, right, let's just press record now so that we don't like half of the gold.
It's been like a girl fanning, like fangirl from a distance thing happening. Really like all your stuff. So it's really nice to have a proper chat.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have been watching you from a distance for a while too. And the reason that I invited you on is because I have shared that I used to be a really indecisive person, and I still, still a bit of a trait for me. And a lot of the women I support have difficulty making decisions and often end up kind of feeling quite stuck in indecision. And so I just saw you as an expert in critical thinking and decision making, and I thought, just come and share all your wisdom with us about how do you help your clients and what tools do you use that can support people to help making decisions.
Oh, it's such a common story what you're describing there, and whether it's a CEO of a big company or just a mum trying to figure out how to parent, we're all human, and people people at every level struggle with decisions. Where to start? There's so much.
There's so much.
There's so much. Yes, I suppose. Yeah. Well, I think it's always interesting to unpack what's going on. Why are we struggling with a decision? And even something as simple as sitting down, writing down on a whiteboard or journaling, however works for you. What's the story? What's going on for you? Is it overwhelm? Is it not enough information? Is it perfectionism? I was just recently listening to a book called Yes Woman, which talks a lot about perfectionism in women. And so when you're trying to make a decision and you're like, but what's the perfect answer? And you think our whole education system now is standardized tests. There is a right and there is a wrong. And we're kind of institutionalized to do the right thing, give the right response to what the teacher wants or what our parents want. And then I think as we get into adulthood, and I've just turned 40 and I'm like, oh God, am I an adult now? With a mortgage and a husband and 2 kids. I'm like, oh, I think maybe I'm an adult now, but I still joke about adulting and, taking that responsibility for decisions. But in terms of what's useful, if people are really stuck, I think breaking it down and saying, what's a way to test out this decision? So, for example, you're trying to move house and you don't know which suburb to go to. Could you rent an Airbnb in the area for a week and see what it's like, or stay with a friend that's there, or just go hang out and just kind of trial things and maybe rent rather than buy. I'm stuck very much on, this is what I think I should do, or this is what I think society says is the right way of doing things. And I'm a big believer in just figuring it out for yourself and doing it your way.
Yes.
Because often, we were just talking about, even something like what you post on LinkedIn, you go, oh, I think there's a particular way you're supposed to do it. And I'm like, oh, I missed that memo. I just started posting. And now, because I don't follow what everyone else does, people go, oh, what you post is quite interesting and different, and I like it. And I'm like, cool.
I so agree. Like, I was actually, the why question to start with is really powerful, right? Because there's something about, as women, we're basically told there's a right and wrong way to do things, and we're told we should do things. So we're not really taught how to make decisions as children, are we? You know, it's and at school, it's not like, well, what most interests you, or what do you think about this? It's like right or wrong, you know. And so I think like it's so interesting to think about why, like to ask yourself, why am I having trouble making decisions first before you actually go through the process?
Yeah, and you're right. Like, generally speaking, no one is teaching kids about decision making in schools. And more and more, I feel like you know, there's things that are bucking this trend, but we do tend to kind of mollycoddle our kids. Like, we make the choices. Oh, you're going to do this after school activity, and I'm going to drive you here, and I'm going to arrange the play date. Whereas when you and I were growing up, it was a bit more like, oh, I'm going to take my bike and I'm going to ride to my friend's house, and I'm going to knock on the door and see if they want to play.
Risk taking maybe as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you know, we were just speaking about my son. He's 8.5, and he's been away for 4 nights without us at a scout camp. And my gut feel was, yes, I think this is a good thing for him to do. But I started to question that when some of our friends were going, oh, it's too young, they shouldn't be able to do that. Whereas I'm really into the whole concept of like free range kids and allowing them that space. That I'll send them to like IGA or to Lawley's, the bakery, by themselves with some cash. And sometimes we'll follow, and it's quite fun, or we'll give them a walkie-talkie. But you know, we do disempower children a lot, and young people, because we're worried about them getting anxious or being worried. You know, like you know, when I was at school, we had to do a presentation. I used to stand up and shake and worry about it for days, but it wasn't an option to say to the teacher, oh, I'm anxious, can I not do this? It was, you're anxious, quite, you know, fair, but you still got to do it. It was not it was a non-negotiable. So it's a tricky balance. And I'm not saying anyone listening who's going, oh, my kid does have anxiety, I'm not questioning that at all, but it's just how much do we change situations so that people don't go through those emotions and don't realize what they are capable of in the end as well.
It's almost like we've lost, because I talk about a lot about like the self-trust muscle, and to be able to make a decision, you need to be able to trust yourself. And it's like, if you're going to start exercising, you know, and lifting weights, and you've got no arm muscles, you can't expect to just lift the biggest weight. Decision making, if you have somehow been quite protected from decision making, which, you know, in society I think most women are when they're younger, then you need to start small, don't you? Kind of like building those decision making blocks. I liked how you said, like, have a practice, you know, like, so maybe if you're making a major decision, like where you're going to live, you know, go and stay at an Airbnb for a weekend and see if you like that, you know. I really like that.
Yeah, and sometimes I refer to it as like nibble rather than scoff. Like, we feel like we have to jump in, and sometimes that's the right thing to do, right? But if there's a way that you can approach a decision that's reversible or less consequential, or both, then it gives you, like Jeff Bezos from Amazon refers to it as like opening a door. Keep your hand on the door handle, right? It means you can test it out. So like when my husband and I moved to Perth, we were only coming for a year. We literally came with a rucksack each. We didn't ship anything. We didn't sell our flat in Clapham Junction. We were just like, we're just going for a year. And then my poor mum, she's like, oh, it's only for a year. Then we avoided it. But genuinely, we didn't think we didn't know that we were going to stay longer. And now we're 12 years in, and you know, the kids have been born here. But we tried it in a very reversible way.
Yeah, and that makes me think of, like, sometimes when my clients have been overwhelmed, I've said, just make a decision about what you need for today or this week, this month, because sometimes it is those bigger decisions that we overwhelm ourselves with. But I was curious if you have any tools for this specific thing that I've noticed a lot of women I work with you mentioned it as well, like there's this idea that there's a right and a wrong decision, and so they tend to get like almost like frozen in fear of making the wrong decision, because we have been conditioned to think that there's a right and a wrong, and to be so fearful of making mistakes. I'm really curious, like what strategies or what tools would you offer someone who notices that they are, maybe it's a bit of perfectionism, you know, like they want to make the perfect choice or the right choice?
I suppose this is where knowing your values can be very useful. And I'm sure you talk to some of your clients about this as well. But and the same, like if you're in a business, you're running your own business, having those business values, you might think, oh, that's what a big company does, but it might just be the same as your personal values. Mine are basically. But then you can go, all right, should I, for example, one of mine is sustainability. I'm very passionate about, you know, the environment and climate and all of that stuff. So when I ask my son, I say, should I ride to this meeting on my bike or should I take the car? And he goes, well, what's your values, Bubby? And I'm like, oh, damn, I'm riding my bike. And it's not that there's a right or a wrong. Like, that's a very basic example, but there's just what's right for you. And again, it's that tapping into intuition. I think we live in the age of the expert, and it's part of, you know, marketing for a business. You go, I know the answers, I can solve your problem. And sometimes I think I do myself out of business because I'm like, no, I firmly believe that you actually know what's best, but maybe you're not tapping into that gut feel, or you're not consciously aware of, you know, what you're trying to achieve here. So, you know, just something simple like, what's it for? Such a great, simple question. But, you know, say you're, I don't know, wanting a new car, right? And there's like 1,000 options. It's insane and it's quite overwhelming. But then you go, right, what's it for? And what's important to me? And, you know, for some people, it's a little runaround. For other people, it's a 4x4. For someone else, it's a camper van. Like, there's no right or wrong. And I feel like the older I get and the more that I do kind of more philosophy, I call it like practical philosophy-based stuff, you go, there is no right answer.
Yes, there is no right answer.
Like clients will say, oh, what do you think? And I'm like, well, this is good for this reason, or you can do it this way and it's good for that reason. There's downsides to both. And this is where trying to write out a pros and cons list, you just end up full of like confirmation bias. There will be a gut feel. I mean, there's something super easy people can do if they're really struggling is like the coin flip technique. Which you probably already know, like, you know, heads it's this, tails it's that, and it's not that the coin answers for you, it's how you feel about the way that it's landed, and kind of tapping into that gut feel. It's the same. Look, I've got magic 8 ball. Sorry, it's not a visual podcast, but I happen to have a magic 8 ball on my desk, and I use it in a similar way, right? It's that, oh, let's ask the magic 8 ball and see what it comes up with, and always you go, oh, I don't like that answer, I'll do it again.
I always say to my clients, like, what are you secretly hoping that I will say? Or like,
that's a great one.
But I think what you're saying here is like we need to stop outsourcing our decision making and our wisdom. Like there is no one who is more of an expert on you than yourself. And that's something I always say to my clients. Like I very much believe in circular leadership, like that I'm just there to hold the space and share the wisdom, but I'm not like this person, this guru at the top. But there are so many people out there who do teach in that kind of guru way of like, I know the answers and do it this way. And it's so easy. I've seen a lot of clients get stuck where they're feeling anxious, they're feeling indecisive, and then they start scrolling Instagram. And you know, there's like 5 different people who will give you 5 different answers.
Oh, totally.
And so I wonder if we've gotten more indecisive, you know, since social media has become more of a bigger part of our lives.
And it's funny, when before I left London, I remember the book Yes Man was a big thing. It was written by somebody that I'd actually met a couple of times in London, and then they made a movie out of it with Jim Carrey, and it was all about saying yes to life. Because at that stage, this was like, you know, Facebook was around, but it wasn't in the same way. I don't think Instagram was around, and so it felt like opportunities and offers weren't there as much. Whereas I feel like I can pick up my phone, scroll Instagram for 10 minutes, and there will be like 100 things I could say yes to, whether it's a product or a service or, you know, working with someone or tickets to a show. And so we do like really need to put those boundaries on, because like, you're right, if you're scrolling Instagram and you're feeling a bit insecure or vulnerable or concerned about something, your reticular activating system, your like spidey senses will switch on, and you'll just go, oh, I think that's the answer. And then there's a bit of confirmation bias, desirability bias, where we see what we want to see. And I think, you know, really in those moments, what we should do ideally is throw the phone away, like go for a walk, sit down, have a think, or talk to a friend who's not trying to sell you something. And sometimes it's great to get an expert in. You know, we were talking earlier about having certain support people and getting that advice, and that's useful. But even when I've paid for advice from people, I've gone, oh, okay, I'm going to take the bits that I like, and then I'm going to, you know, mold it a little bit into what feels good for me, because what feels right for someone else and they think is a great idea might not be comfortable. And I'm all for pushing your comfort zone, absolutely, but it's also worth kind of sitting with it and going, okay, what feels good right now? And being aware of how you feel, you know, emotionally, physically. Are you dehydrated and exhausted when you're trying to think what to do? Or
like it's okay to bracket a decision as well. You know, what comes up for me, and I think social media has played a part in this, is that we have lost our capacity to hold nuance and complex, you know, the power of the and. So like, for example, the decision I make every day, my daughter goes to daycare 2 days a week. And every day that I like drop her off at daycare, I have this like sliding doors moment where I'm like, oh, there's a part of me that would love to spend the day with her, but I'm also really excited to go and work in my business because I love it. And I used to think that was mum guilt, but actually when I unpacked it more, I was like, actually, no, that's just me being aware of the trade-offs, that with every decision I make, there is a trade-off. And so when I choose to leave my daughter in daycare, I do miss her and I miss out on that time with her, but I also get time in my business. And if I chose the other decision, if I chose to spend the whole day with her, I'd be aware of missing out on my business. And so I think like it's, I don't know, do you find this with your clients, but it's almost like people want to find a decision that's perfect, like a choice where there isn't any trade-off, where they're 100% happy with it. And I just wonder if we don't talk enough about the fact that most decisions come with trade-offs and mixed feelings.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, the word to decide, it comes from side, like homicide. It's cutting off. And I think you can spend your whole time worrying about what am I missing out on, or what have I, you know, what has this decision led to? And it's really interesting to join the dots looking back and go, you know, because I chose this particular unit in my degree, it meant that I got this job, and because I got this job, I got something else and this opportunity. So it's always fascinating to follow that back. It's I like, you know, you mentioned nuance. It's so important. And I think with critical thinking, the whole kind of point is that we want to see that nuance and unpack it. And when you're looking at something, say for example a newspaper article, you don't know the people, you're just going off what's in there. It's very easy to go, oh, here's the hero and here's the villain. Isn't this bad? You know, and the media really feeds into this, you know, black and white false dichotomy of this is good, this is bad, or these people are right, these people are wrong. And the reality, when it's a story you know something about, maybe you know a person or you were at the scene and you're like, oh, hang on a minute, that's not accurate. So the more you learn about anything, the more nuance you realize there is. And listening to a few sort of scientists on podcasts recently, and the podcast, you know, the interviewer will be like, oh, you know, is coffee good or bad? Or should we have more sleep or whatever? And I've had a few go, well, it depends, because it really does. There's no yes or no answer here. But again, we're kind of like conditioned into wanting are very clear, and it's human nature, right? We want what's called cognitive closure. We don't like sitting in discomfort. We want to kind of, you know, put a line under it, finish that chapter, close the door, and you go, oh, life's messy. And the gray areas are really, you know, I've seen a lot of stuff recently. It's like, it's that willingness to sit in discomfort and uncertainty.
Yeah.
It gives people enormous power, but it's so hard to do.
It is hard. Yeah.
And I've been feeling that a few times myself recently. You're like, oh God.
Yeah, we're not taught how to sit with discomfort. We're almost encouraged to avoid it. And I know for me, I have a bit of a motto like less thinking, more action. And that obviously that's not a motto that I would encourage everyone to follow. It depends on if, you know, there are some people who make decisions really quickly and easily, and maybe sometimes they need to spend more time thinking about their choices, but I tend to attract women who are pretty similar to me, lots of overthinking. And like sometimes for me, my business didn't start growing until I learned to start taking action more quickly and just viewing as experiments that, well, let's experiment with this and see if it works. If it doesn't, I can try something else, you know.
That's it. Yeah, I talk in my strategic thinking workshop, so I try and make it quite personal. So often people will choose a personal situation or something that's going on for them, and I talk about momentum maker, like what's the little step that's going to get you out from going round in circles and get you moving forward in some way, even if it's just reaching out to someone for a conversation, just Googling something, you know. Just make a start, ask ChatGPT how you do it, you know. And ask ChatGPT to break it down for you even. And then often I've got the momentum maker and mundane magic. Like often there will be a habit or a routine or something that, you know, it's not boring. It's not sexy. It's quite boring. It's just something that you do every day, like go to bed on time or do your pelvic floor exercises or, you know, it's just that boring stuff that you got to do, right? Drinking water, whatever it is, but there will be some mundane magic. And for me, it's like, you know, writing stuff down, just whether it's actual writing for the public or writing down my to-do list, just sitting down, having 5 minutes to just write stuff down, write it on the mirror in the bathroom, as I often do. But that's, you know, one example of like mundane magic, those things that once you do it all the time, it just builds.
And you get that. So for me, it's like booking, when I'm in a bit of an indecisive place, I often will book a launch date or book a course date and add it into my Google Calendar. And it is quite a mundane thing, but it does create that momentum. And then I'm less likely to slip back and maybe change my mind, you know. And obviously sometimes we do change our minds, but I find making a tentative decision is better than not making any decision.
Yeah, absolutely. So and what happens then, like people get hung up, there's like some cost bias and you know, they think I've already put in this much time, energy and effort to something and now I'm stuck with it forever. I had a situation earlier this week where I was meant to be participating in an event, but there was another sponsor and so I was like, oh, okay, no worries, I'll pull back. And then it was a yes, and then it was a no. And then in the end, sort of middle person was asked to tell me, oh no, actually we don't want to proceed. And I was like, that's fine, like it doesn't matter. And I really wasn't bothered at all, but I could see that they were really concerned about my reaction. And it became a difficult conversation for them to the point where they just outsourced it. Hopefully they don't listen to this. I don't think they will.
Probably unlikely. Do you think that part of supporting our process to make decisions then is that also giving ourselves permission to change our minds? Because I find a lot of women shame themselves or have negative stories about if they change their mind, and that is sometimes what makes them stuck in the decision-making process too.
Oh, absolutely. And to use your permission to change your, like, we worry that something is forever. And the reality is, on a grand life scale, literally nothing is forever. So if you've given something to try, I mean, it's funny, I got kind of a bit of a pulling up on willingness to make decisions, change minds, try something new on a recent webinar. And I was like, a decision can also be to keep things the same, but realize that that is also a choice.
Yes.
You know, so yeah, permission to change your mind, permission to just follow the intuition, right? Because what was right 2 years ago in that situation may not be right now. You think about all the things that will have changed in that context. So it's good to kind of revisit stuff.
Yeah. And what's your relationship to decision making now? Because you're an expert in this area, like you teach people about it every day. So I'm really curious, like how you make your decisions, and if it's like always easy or if you still find it hard sometimes.
Oh, look, there's some decisions that I'm ace at. Like, give me a menu, boom, I've decided within 2 seconds.
Love that.
My older brother sits for about half an hour, and I sit there and go, just make a choice. So sometimes, impatience is a thing that I have to work with sometimes. Yeah, it's funny because people come to me and they say, oh, I was struggling with this decision. So I thought, what would Bethan do?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh God, now I feel terribly responsible. But I think similar to what you were saying with business, particularly, there's definitely a bias to action. And I think where it gets messy actually is because in business, I think you have to evolve. You have to keep changing and trying new things because if your marketing strategy now on Instagram doesn't have reels, then you're crazy, right? Whereas 5 years ago, people were like, what, video? Oh, don't know about that.
Yes.
So in business, you do have to change and you have to try new things and experiment and stay relevant. Whereas in your personal life, I think it's worth thinking about that a bit more and taking time with that. But, the long game, I think, is important. Thinking about not necessarily exactly how I want it to be, but roughly where do I want to be? Who do I want to be with? What do I want life to look like in 10 years' time? It's a really useful way to kind of just frame things well and go, okay, for example, I've just set up a company rather than being a sole trader. And it's part of this, okay, maybe right now it could go either way and it would be fine either way. But in 10 years' time, I want to be at a level where it makes sense for me to have a company. So it's sort of making the decision with the end in mind.
That future self decision making. I mean, I'm sure a lot of small business owners have experienced a bit of a slowdown this year. And it's sad. You're seeing some business owners decide to close their doors, and obviously sometimes they don't have a choice with that. The thing that's helped me is to go, okay, well, maybe I am going to experience a bit of a slower year in business this year, and I'm very privileged that I can wait it out with thinking about what my big picture, how do I want to be working when my daughters are teenagers? I want to be able to pick them up from school and hear how their day's gone. I don't want to be working full time as a hospital social worker or,
100%.
I do think, and obviously there are times in our lives where we have to, like, there's more urgent short-term decisions that have to be made, but it is really powerful, isn't it, to think about the future. And I love the questions. Can you say them again? Like, what was it? Who I want to be, who I want to be around.
Oh, what did I say? Yeah, what does life look like? Who's around? I suppose, how do I want to feel as well? I suppose there's that hustle kind of mindset we can fall into, and comparison. And interesting, you're saying, a lot of business owners having a slower year. Sometimes, other people can have a slow year. It doesn't mean that's going to be true for you. And yet, if we tell ourselves, oh, things are a bit slower, we create that story, and then we look for evidence to support what we're saying to ourselves, whereas I'm sure there's people out there that are killing it and having their best year ever.
Definitely. I think that's it's kind of like COVID, like it affected everyone's businesses really differently. But I have seen a few small business owners, decide to go get part-time jobs or to close their businesses, and it is it's like, how do you make a choice in the short term and the long term? And even that, like, even deciding to, maybe getting a part-time job, but that doesn't mean you're permanently deciding to walk away from business.
I did that. So 18 months ago, I know we were talking earlier about like we were sort of swapping who was the main breadwinner in the family, and so I went to work as a consultant on a regular basis for a couple of different training organizations. And I remember at the time feeling a bit of a failure, feeling like, oh, have I let myself down that I can't at this point, make enough of my own sales. But it literally was like, oh, I need to double my income within a couple of months here. How do I do that and have some stability to the work? So, you do what you've got to do and you do what's right. And it was only when I signed up for this consulting work that I realized other people that I knew, who I knew pretty well, were already doing that. And I had no idea. I was really like, oh my gosh, you're here too. Like, and it was really quite reassuring to find out who was there and how they were doing things and how it was structured. And I did it for a year, pretty much, almost to the day, I think. And I was really glad when I could say, no, I don't need to do this anymore. And it's actually been beneficial since I've done that, because it's created space for other things. But at the time, it was 100% the right thing to do. I don't regret it. I got great experience. I have, knowledge of other training organizations now, how they do things. I've met some amazing people, one of whom I'm hoping will come work for me one day. So I'm big on like, don't regret stuff.
Yes, I love that story
so much. Sorry, I cut you off there. What were you saying?
No, I was saying it's like, I love that example, because I think it's like that beautiful balance of like making decisions in the short term, but also with that view to the future. But also it shows how it's the meaning you make of a decision as well that matters. So like you were able to reframe it as, actually, this is going to support me in the long term, rather than it being like, so many small business owners, if they do have to take on like a little bit of extra part-time work or something like that, will make it mean that they failed, when obviously that's not true at all. Like, I know so many incredible business owners who would say, they had a part-time job for like the first 5 years in business or whatever. So I love that example. Thank you for sharing that.
That's okay. And I think, it's nice to just hear actually someone else feeling, initially, oh God, I failed. But it actually led to, I think, landing some clients. The fact that I happened to work at one organization in the same way that I often go, oh yeah, I used to work at UWA. I'll just, put that in there. It's that kind of halo effect of association with different organizations, different people, different experience. So lots of benefits. And I think that's it. You exactly what you said, you make your own meaning from it. I'm very glass half full. I can find the positives of absolutely anything.
My old therapy supervisor used to have this saying, all paths lead to Rome. And I so love it, because I studied social work I started when I was 18, and I didn't really know what I was going to do with that degree. And then probably like 6 years into my career, I was like, oh, actually, I want to do like psychotherapy. In Australia, that really meant I should have studied psychology. Like it would have been an easier pathway to go into private practice. And so I spent time thinking, oh, I've made the wrong decision. I've done the wrong degree. And it would have been so much work to go back and do psych when I already had so much experience. But I just ended up finding my own path to becoming a therapist in a different way as a social worker.
100%.
She got trained in the UK, actually, funnily.
There you go.
They do like this amazing CBT training over there for social workers and psychs and OTs. So I was very lucky when I was over there. But I always use that as an example, like, of that concept that if there is no wrong or right decision, if we just see it all as a journey to where we're ultimately aiming to go, there's so much freedom in decision making, isn't there?
I love that. And I really enjoy sitting down with someone and finding out their path. And so the fact that you didn't do it the right way means you have other tools, other knowledge, other experience, which means you will do it slightly differently to how someone else might do it, but that it may be a better fit for your clients and what you've ended up doing in the end.
That was a funny, interesting experience, because I had a lot of people, like, there's a lot of social workers who are like, oh, I'm not as good because I'm not a psych. But I've had so many counselling clients say to me, oh, I actually love that you're really different. You work really different to a lot of psychs.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Like people who do my line of work, some have like the work experience, like they were in a senior leadership role and then they've gone to be a consultant. Some have marketing backgrounds, some have God, I don't know, they've done something completely different and then just revamped their whole life. You know, my background being teaching, it means that my approach is very much about what are people going to learn? What's the pedagogy? How are we going to scaffold this? What's the educational philosophy of what we're trying to do here? You know, so the way that I do it is rooted in, you know, teaching teenagers for a long time, and I'm like, you're going to fall asleep unless I'm bringing some energy. Transfer that to a corporate environment. People are like, geez, wow, that was like really engaging, and I've been completely absorbed in what we're doing, and the time flew, and I'm like, that's how it should be.
That's how it should be. I love that. And that's another example of all paths lead to Rome, right? Like you could have said to yourself, oh, well, I want to teach this, so I should have studied this. But actually, no, you started off as a teacher, and that brings like a whole lot of strength to what you're doing now as well.
100%. And I've sat with friends that I think they do amazing work, and they have like senior leadership positions, and they're like, oh, I wish I had a teaching degree because I want to do more in education. And I'm like, oh, I wish I had experience of like managing teams, and then I'd have so many more stories to bring. But we all just bring our own experience and life. You know, every single thing we've done up until this moment goes into who we are, how we see things, our interpretation of the world, and how we approach a decision. And it's so fascinating when you like unpack that with someone. You're like, oh, okay. You know, stupid thing, I nearly bought a particular plant in Bunnings earlier with my daughter because it reminded me of my grandmother, and she's like, you should get this one. And I'm like, oh, it'd be really bad in that environment, it'd be rubbish. And I'm like, oh, maybe I can make it work.
I love the way you're thinking, and you know, we've got to wrap up in a minute, but only because I've got to go somewhere. Otherwise, I could keep talking to you for an hour. But you know who I really think needs to listen to this, and I don't really think I have many teenagers listening to this episode, but if anyone's a mum of a teenager, like I feel like it's in year 12 or year 11, year 12, when you're choosing your ATAR, when you're choosing what you're going to do outside of high school. I've had so many young people who are like so petrified of making the wrong decision. And I think like hearing from you, hearing from me that like, hey, we've both ended up with businesses that are actually quite different to how our study and our career started. There is no wrong choice when it comes to like, deciding what you're going to study and all of that. Because there's so much pressure on these young people, isn't there, to make the right decision. You can see where that fear and indecision starts for us, right?
Oh, totally. So I think, you know, be willing to make mistakes, like, and that's okay. And it's not a mistake, it's not wrong, it's just different, and you'll learn so much and you don't even know you're going to learn, you know. And you
won't care, like in 5 years time, what the decision you're making won't seem as big, I think, as well.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. So if people want to keep connected with you, follow along and learn more about your amazing work, where do you most hang out? Is it Instagram, LinkedIn, a bit of both?
A bit of both, really. Instagram I duck in and out of. Sometimes I get a bit like, oh, too much, it might be the brain. But always on LinkedIn, and Instagram is a bit more like just me as a human being, if you like, though I like to think my LinkedIn's fairly personable and approachable as well. So both those platforms, website, you know, just me, very easy to find. Just Google me, you'll find me.
Thank you, Bethan. I'll put all those links in the show notes so we can follow along and hang out with you. But thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Sam.